Welcome everybody to Virtual Stormwater Inspections with live Q&A. Very happy you could all join us, and there may be some more joining, so they'll just trickle in, but we're gonna get going. So I wanted to start with providing an agenda. We're gonna start with welcome and introductions, and then we'll go over webinar details. We'll take a quick poll, just 3 quick questions, and we'll review those. And then we'll dive into the live stormwater inspections. After that, we'll do live Q&A with all 4 jurisdictions, and then we'll close the webinar. So it should take roughly 90 minutes, and that really depends on the type of discussions that we get into, so we can be flexible a little bit there. I want you all to know right away that this is being recorded. So when we do get to the Q&A, if you want to raise your hand and actually come live with us and ask a question and participate in some discussion, your video will show up if it's on. So if you're uncomfortable with that because this is being recorded, then make sure that your video is off. And if you're cool with it, then awesome. But yes, this is being recorded. So I may say that a few more times throughout this event. So first of all, the purpose of this webinar is to show an overview of a live stormwater facility inspection and to replicate the feel of our in-person workshop a little bit, because I know that we all really enjoy that and we get so much value out of it. So we'll be going live. It's a bit experimental, but we're going to do our very best. We've got 3 folks out in the field and it's super hot, and they are going to show you several different facilities. And then another really big piece of this is to get connected with your local jurisdiction and really with one another. So hopefully we can achieve all of those goals. So I'd love for you to meet the team. My name's Kelsey Crane. I'm with Community Planning, and I'm a Stormwater Outreach Specialist at Thurston County. I'm also the instructor for the online course. We have Anne Marie Pierce with Community Planning Stormwater Outreach as well at Thurston County. Kathy Lynn, Public Works Stormwater Inspector at Thurston County. Skylar Specht, Public Works Stormwater Inspector at Thurston County. Susan McCleary, Public Works Senior Stormwater Program Specialist at the City of Olympia. Meredith Greer, Water Resources Stormwater Outreach Specialist at the City of Tumwater. Dave Kengieser, Water Resources Stormwater Inspector at the City of Tumwater. Emily Watts, Public Works Stormwater Outreach Specialist at the City of Lacey. And Carlos Aviles Ortiz, Community Planning Stormwater Inspector at the City of Lacey. So that is your panel. And so any questions that you have throughout this entire event, submit them whenever you would like. Type them into the Q&A, and you can ask them directly to one of us or to the whole group. And then when we get to the Q&A, we'll answer them. And some may actually answer throughout the workshop. So here's some details on the webinar tonight. All participants, you've been automatically muted. So if you're wondering why you can't get your speaker to work or whatnot, that's because you're automatically muted. And so if you ever want to say anything, we'll wait until the Q&A for that. Just raise your hand, and like I said before, I will promote you to a panelist. And if your video is on, we will all be able to see you. Again, this event is being recorded, so if you're uncomfortable with that, turn your video off. All panelists, please remain muted when you're not speaking. We're going to do our very best to control this because you never know. We're all dealing with being at home, and we have dogs and we have kids and all kinds of stuff. So remain muted whenever you're not speaking. And just so you know, all poll answers are submitted as anonymous, so no one will know who answered what. Feel free to submit questions throughout the entire webinar, and we'll get to go over as many as possible live after the field visit. Scroll over the bottom of your screen to see the icons pop up, and then you'll see a Q&A icon, and that's where you'll submit those questions. Again, questions can be directed to all or can be specific to one of the panelists. And panelists may answer some questions by text during the inspections, but the live Q&A will be reserved for after. And once again, I'm going to state that this webinar is being recorded and it will be made public within a few days. And just a reminder, we're all learning to navigate this online world together. So let's be patient with one another. We will do our very best to control the sound and the video quality for this webinar and make the experience as seamless and useful for you as possible. But we're also all human and very understanding of the current circumstances. So, including you guys, everybody who's participating tonight, we're just happy you're here and we're all here together and kind of live together. If your dog barks or something like that, we forgive you. Please forgive us as well. All right. So let's jump into a quick poll. All right, the poll is live. Starting to get some answers coming in. Do about 30 more seconds, see if we can get everybody. It's like we're just about there. Couple more seconds. Okay, if you wanted to submit your last answers, I'm going to give you a couple more seconds here. And I'm going to end the poll now. So it looks like 36% are from Thurston County, 36% from the city of Olympia, 7% from the city of Lacey, 21% from the city of Tumwater. So we have a nice mix. And our stormwater inspection priorities tonight. 29% say catch basins. 79% say ponds. I'm not surprised there. We're going to be going and looking at a dry and a wet pond tonight, so that's good. 36% say inlet outlet pipes. We'll also be looking at those. And 21% say they're not that familiar and just want to know about them all. Perfect. And the best part about summer, 14% say the weather, 14% say enjoying the outdoors, 43% with fresh berries. I totally agree. 21% say spending time with friends and family, and 7% say summer's been pretty meh. Well, I hope it looks up. And with that, we're going to keep going. So now, the moment we've all been waiting for, we're going to go into the virtual stormwater inspections with the city of Tumwater, and we actually have representation tonight from Thurston County and the city of Lacey as well. So this is very collaborative out there in the field, and I am going to hand over the floor.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Dave. I'm with the city of Tumwater. I'm a water resources specialist for the water program there. And I'll walk you through the inspection process and some of the tricks of the trade and the tools of the trade that I use for my inspections, and hopefully that'll help you out with your inspections for your homeowners associations. First, we'll go over some of the tools that you'll need for your inspection. You might get wet, so good pair of boots. You want a flashlight, a good flashlight that you can see down into catch basins and up into inlets and outlets. A good pair of gloves. You'll want a camera to document your storm ponds. You might need a set of loppers if you have to get access to any particular area. And you'll need a catch basin rod. This is to probe the inside of the catch basin to see how much sediment you have. And right here I just have a piece of a 1-inch PVC pipe that will work just fine, and I've actually got it marked with the different increments of a foot and 6 inches. So should be able to tell how much sediment we have and how big our sump is based on that. You'll also want your inspection form. Now, it's really important that you update your contact information. A lot of times that's the only way we'll be able to tell who you are and how to contact you is through this form. Make sure it's filled out completely. And you'll also want your as-builds. And for this particular pond area I have the as-builds for, this is really going to help us out to tell us what we have here as far as inventory of the facilities. And it's also going to tell us where the water is flowing to. So we should be able to capture everything that's here at the ponds from these as-builds. Now I want to go into these as-builds a little bit for you so you can understand what I'm looking at when I look at these as-builds. First, you'll have this legend, and this is going to tell you what all these symbols mean. And a lot of it's engineering speak, but you should be able to tell just from this basic legend what we're going to be looking at. You'll also want to pay attention to the general notes. Sometimes that has a few things that you'll be seeing in the specs that you might have questions about, and it might be answered in those general notes. Here's the plan for the pond itself. We have a couple of catch basins here. We have a couple of inlets to the wet pond. We have an overflow to the dry pond, and we have another inlet to this dry pond. So we're going to check out all those. The other thing that these as-builds will tell you is the elevation of your pond, elevation of the bottom of the pond and the elevation of the top of the pond. So based on these, you should be able to tell how much sediment has accumulated in the bottom of the pond if you need to clean it out at any particular time. And again, here's more elevations for the bottom of the dry pond, and then any of the facilities that are associated with your pond. This set of plans has a planting plan as well for the landscaping. So you can tell if you've got damaged or diseased trees or shrubs, you'll know exactly what those trees or shrubs are so you can replace them. And again, that tells you what they are in the legend. So you want to pay attention to that. And then again, any notes that go along with that planting plan. So the as-builds are really important to know the inventory of your facility. So make sure you can get these through your jurisdiction. You call your inspector, call your water resources program at the jurisdiction that you live at, and they can help you out get these and walk you through them if you have any questions about them as well. Let's see. So from there, it's a good idea as well to take a garbage bag with you just in case you run into any trash. So I'll usually tie that around my belt loop and put it in my pocket. It's also a good time to check the garbage bags in your pet waste station if you have one. A lot of times these dry pond areas are good alternative use for dogs to play in and whatnot. So with that, the catch basins. The water comes into the catch basin and then flows into the pond. And I usually like to follow the water when I do my inspection. So it's important to note too that when you do these catch basins, that you only want to do the catch basins on the private drives, not in the right-of-way. The jurisdiction's public works office will handle the catch basins in the right-of-way. So don't bother with those. We got them. If you find a problem with those though, don't hesitate to call us at the city or the county and tell us there's a problem with them so we can come out and clean them out for you. So here we have our first catch basin. And you can see we got it coned off. You can see I'm wearing my high-vis shirt here. And what you're going to want to do is stick that probe right down in the catch basin and go all the way to the bottom. Jam it all the way down there so you know. Then when you pull it up, you'll have your water level. My water level's right here at 2.5 feet. Now I can also tell where my sediment starts. That's about 8 inches or so. So we're about 1/3 full there. We're going to want to get that cleaned out eventually, real soon. I'll show you what the sump is. We want that 1/3 full of the sump is the trigger for have that cleaned out. Now the sump is the distance between the bottom of the inlet pipe and the bottom of the catch basin. That's your sump. So I'll show you that right here. Lift this up. And here you can see, there's the bottom of the pipe and the water level there. And the sump is all the way to the bottom, from that bottom of the pipe to all the way to the bottom. So the trigger is 1/3. Just be careful if you're removing these grates. They're really heavy. Sometimes it takes 2 people, so make sure you have a partner when you're doing this. So from here, the water flows to the wet pond. So we're going to go to the wet pond here. We're going to wait for traffic. The next stop is the inlet to the wet pond. So we'll check the inlet. Now the inlets, you want to check to make sure that they're not full of sediment. You want to check to make sure the energy dissipator is intact, the riprap or the rocks. And you want to check to make sure it's clear, free of vegetation. So this particular inlet is actually a little bit submerged, and that's okay. We can still check it out here. You can see here, this is our riprap, and it looks really good. It's in really good shape. There's no vegetation that's covering it. Our inlet pipe is free of sediment. There's no vegetation that's impeding water flow around that, so that looks really good. This is a great looking inlet. Now, while we're here at the wet pond, we also want to look in the general pond and look for vegetation. If vegetation's overgrown, we'll want to have that vegetation managed. Cattails are a big problem in wet ponds. And we like to see less than 25% of the pond area covered in cattails. If you're going to have somebody come in and remove the cattails, just remove them all if you can, because they'll come back just fine. But 25% is the threshold for cattail maintenance. You also want to check for invasive species and noxious weeds. Now we have a couple here. We have Scotch broom. We've got some thistle. So we'll have this come in, and the crews come in and treat this or remove it mechanically. You can find out what the noxious weeds are in Thurston County through the Thurston County Noxious Weed List online. We have a link to that on all the jurisdictions. And if you have any questions about what a noxious weed is or how to treat it, just get a hold of somebody at your jurisdiction and they can help you walk through the process of getting rid of the noxious weeds. Let's see, from here, you want to also check to make sure that the liner is intact. Since this is a wet pond, it's got a liner that keeps the water in it. So obviously it's holding water in the middle of August, so it's probably in pretty good shape. That's a good sign. And you also want to check the banks to make sure there's no erosion on the bank. And here it looks pretty good. And you'll want to walk all the way around your pond just to make sure that there's no erosion. And if there is, you want to get that treated and get some more vegetation on it so it doesn't erode again. Yeah, this pond's in pretty good shape. So let's go to the overflow structure. That's where the water's going to go next. And overflow structures can be a wide variety of different facilities. This one happens to be what we call a beehive. And it's just a big cylinder of concrete with a grate over the top of it. So when the pond gets up to a certain level, it spills into that beehive and then goes to the dry pond to infiltrate back into the groundwater. this particular beehive structure has a downturned 90-degree elbow. And what that does is it keeps oil and floatables from floating over into the dry pond where we don't want it. So if you see any floatables or oil in your beehive structure or your overflow structure, you're going to want to get that taken care of and cleaned out. And again, if you have questions about how to do oil or something like that, call your jurisdiction and they'll help you out. This looks like it's in really good shape though, so that's good. So from here, the water is going to go over to the dry pond for infiltration. So it flows from the beehive under the street and again into another inlet. Now here again, you can see the riprap really good. It's in really good shape. There's not any weeds in the riprap. Our pipe's clear of sediment, which is a good thing. Any pipe that's over 18 inches should have a trash rack, and that's basically a grate that covers it. So if your trash rack is damaged or it's missing, contact your jurisdiction or go to a plumbing supply store and they'll hook you up with a trash rack. Again, you want to check your general pond area for invasive weeds, overgrown vegetation, erosion. An infiltration pond should not have a liner, so you don't have to worry about that. But you still want to keep it maintained, keep the grass cut below 10 inches is the threshold for maintenance on vegetation in a pond area. So if your grass is getting up over 10 inches, you want to get it cut. And so that could be 3 or 4 times a year. It could be once a year. It just depends on your situation. So keep an eye on that. And then if you have any specialty type of proprietary facility in your storm pond or in your storm area system, contact your jurisdiction and they can help you inspect that and connect you with the proprietor that sells that particular item, and they can come and help inspect as well. So with that,
only other thing I would mention is that there are some saplings around the wet pond, if you saw that, and it's best to get those when they're really small. So yeah, the smaller diameter the trees are, the little alders and those invasive trees, the better they are when they're small.
Yeah, the smaller the tree, the less likely it has already damaged the liner as well. So if you get them early, there's less likelihood that you'll have to have some expensive repairs and repairing that liner with a larger root system. So with that, thanks for joining me on my inspection. This one's in pretty good shape. Hopefully yours is too.
So panelists, feel free to unmute yourselves. And let's dive into some Q&A. Okay, Brian, I am going to promote you to a panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is an Advil?
Oh, I think you mean as built.
I'm not sure. It came across as ADVIL, but I wasn't sure.
Okay, I am going to assume that you mean as built here, and that is your engineered stormwater facility drawing. So at the beginning, before Dave went out into the different facilities, he had a stack of sheets, right, that he was talking about that tell you what kind of vegetation and how much, all the different types of facilities, where the inlet and outlet pipes are, how the water flows through the different facilities. Do you remember that?
Well, actually, I remember that, and maybe this would be, maybe it would be better if I asked Susan McCleary, how do I get that item for my stormwater surface facility?
Okay, Susan.
Hi, Brian. Glad you made it tonight. I would be happy to send you a copy of your as-built. So I will do that tomorrow. I'll make a little note here that you'd like those. Generally, we have most of those on file. So I do have yours, and I will send them over to you.
Very good. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question to all of the inspectors. What kind of rock is used for a splash pad, and how big should the pad be? So whoever feels like answering, jump on in.
I can answer that. The splash pad should be about a foot in depth. That's below the pipe, the inlet pipe. And currently it's like 8 foot on each side, 6 to 8 feet on each side of the pipe on the newer developments. The rock they use is called riprap, and it's 6 to 8 inch diameter with maybe some smaller pieces in it. You want to have the bigger rock so that the water is dispersed and doesn't just move the rock around when the water comes in at high flow.
There's another question I see here that I can answer.
Okay.
Terry asks, the inspection form is due in August. Our ponds are professionally cleared in September. Should we send in the form in September or send 2 forms? I'm going to answer for Thurston County. If any other jurisdiction is different, please chime in. I'm totally okay with you sending in the form in August, mentioning that the maintenance is going to be completed in September. And then in September, I would just ask for a follow-up when it's completed. If any other jurisdiction is different than that, please chime in.
This is Susan from Olympia, and that would be a good process for us as well. Go ahead and send in your inspection form noting when you think you're going to be doing your maintenance, and then we'll try to schedule our audit of your site for after that, but it would be really helpful to get an email from you letting us know that you did in fact complete that maintenance.
And this is Carlos for Lacey. We would agree with that process also.
Right on. Does anybody else have anything to add there, or should we move on to Brian Walsh?
Yeah, this is just Dave from Tumwater, and we're totally okay with that process as well.
Right on. Okay. What damage does vegetation do in the wet pond?
This is Kathy from Thurston County, and I could answer that. The excess vegetation, when it dies back, all the material goes to the bottom of the pond and adds to the sediment level that build up in the bottom of your wet pond. So you want to keep your vegetation managed so that you don't have a lot of material that's going to die back and fill up your pond quickly. So there's a certain amount of, like I said, that's why we do 25% as a threshold for the cattail, because there's a lot of material when a cattail dies back. And sometimes people cut the cattail and they forget to remove the material, and then all that material just fills up the pond. So that's one reason we want to keep the vegetation at a smaller amount.
Kathy, do you want to also talk about, I know, I think it was Skylar had mentioned something about seeing saplings in the wet pond and how the roots can damage a liner of a wet pond, depending on where you see them growing, and also where you see them growing, if they could impact the inlet pipes too.
That's correct.
I'm talking about like tree species.
Yeah. Trees, all the vegetation tends to come around the inlet pipe where there's a constant flow of water. And as the trees get bigger, those roots can get in around that pipe. And I've seen where the trees have blown over and they've twisted the pipe, or they can just damage the pipe underground. So those are areas that you really need to pay attention to. Other saplings, if they're growing on the sides of the ponds, anywhere where that pond liner is, you can poke holes in the liner and you'll lose your water retention in your wet pond. So anything that's most of your plants for your planting plan for your pond would be at the higher top of the slope, around the pond top, not on the berm, but if there's a berm between two ponds, there wouldn't be any trees in that area. Yeah, so that you don't want any trees to fall into the pond, damage the liner, damage the side of the pond if they do blow over.
Kelsey, I noticed there was a question from Jack Eppert, and I believe he lives in the city of Olympia, and he was asking about infiltration galleries. And Kathy, chime in if I don't have this correct exactly. There are 3 pipes going down into the gallery with caps, and when he inspects the pipes, he wants to know what he should see. And it's my understanding that when he looks down in there during like the dry season like this, he wouldn't want to see any water, and you wouldn't want to see any sediment build up in there. Is that correct?
That's correct. You're not going to be able to see a lot through those ports because they're mostly for cleaning. If you're having a problem with infiltration with your gallery, it's best to have somebody come with a camera that they can run down in through those pipes and take a look and see if there's a sediment buildup in there or if there's any damage to the pipes. But mostly you'll through that inspection port, you'll just be able to maybe see some sediment. But I'd keep an eye on that. But if you start having problems with water infiltrating, then you've probably got something going on, and you should contact someone that has a camera that they can look in there.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah. I want to address this question, why no trees by the dry pond? Would they not use up water through transpiration? I know we touched on trees a little bit, but I think this is something that continues to kind of confuse folks.
I can speak to the trees again. The ponds are designed to infiltrate at a certain rate, and when you have trees growing in the bottom of the pond, the roots actually break the surface and allow water to infiltrate a little faster. And also the same problem if they blow over, they can damage the bottom. So they should be no less than they shouldn't be below the high water mark. They should be above the high water mark. So if you have some trees growing up a little higher on the slope, it's probably okay, but the bottom is the bigger problem. And they're much easier to deal with when they're small.
Okay. And then the young saplings in the retention pond. So there were 10 very young saplings identified in the flat basin of a retention pond, and yet it still passed and was found to be in compliance. And the question is, why weren't the young saplings identified?
I can answer that. I believe that we would like to see ongoing maintenance done to those saplings, definitely have them cut back. It doesn't matter what species they are, they shouldn't be growing in the bottom of the pond, so they should be cut back as soon as possible. If it's a retention pond, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Kathy, I don't think that you're going to want to be digging up the roots. You're just going to be wanting to cut those back. Is that correct?
That's correct. Just cut them off. I guess if they're super small, you could probably pull them out without any damage. But and I can't really speak to that particular development. But I'm thinking of myself when I'm doing an inspection. Sometimes if they're really small, rather than being nitpicky, I'll kind of see if the maintenance happens, and then by the next year, then I might mention that they need to start working on getting those trees out of there. But if they're super small and, giving the homeowners the benefit of the doubt that they're going to go out and do that maintenance.
Awesome. Okay, I've got another pond question. Our pond is now 10 years old and no longer holds water like it did in the first 5 to 6 years. How do we determine if this is due to damage?
That's a tough question. Is it a wet pond? Do they know it's a wet pond and it's supposed to hold water? So anyway, if they don't know, if it's an infiltration pond that holds water for a time, but not, you know, all year. Some actually even wet ponds will they'll evaporate and dry out. Depends on the design, and they should check their as-built and see if there's a liner. It could be a clay liner. It could be a poly liner. But there may be some damage if there is a liner to it.
Happy.
Yeah.
Let's see what Dawn has to say. I just promoted her to panelist.
Okay.
So Dawn, can you give us a few more details on your pond?
So can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so we moved in right after, so the neighborhood had been established for about a year to a year and a half when we moved in. And initially, whenever it was I believe it's the retention pond, I think it has a clay liner. This is Deschutes River Highlands. It's a huge pond out here. And for the first 5 or 6 years, anytime it rained heavily, we would have water for days and weeks and even months. And then after about 5 to 6 years, we noticed that not only was it not holding water, but even when it rained really heavily, it just wouldn't hold water for more than a day. And so we really noticed a difference, and we were wondering, how do we even determine what's causing that, or is that just normal?
It sounds a little bit to me like if it's a clay liner, it's probably failed, and that maybe there were trees growing in it that the roots actually permeated that clay liner is possible. I mean, there's a lot of things it could be, but it just sounds like the clay liner has failed.
Okay, yeah, that was my fear. Thank you.
Dawn also would like a copy of the as-built. So.
Yeah, I've been working with Dawn here for the last couple of weeks, so
perfect.
I have her contact information, and I'll shoot those right over to you. And Dawn, thanks for the inspection report. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for your help.
That's perfect. Okay. All right. So can we use herbicides to kill excess vegetation? This is a tricky one.
Well, it is a tricky one. I can speak to this again. It's not Thurston County's policy to promote any sort of herbicides, but it's a private pond, and so you have to make that decision. And if it's a noxious weed, you might have to deal with it in that way. But anytime you have an herbicide applied to a wet pond, you have to have a certified aquatic specialist herbicide applicator do the work. You can't just go down to the store and get some stuff and do that. So you have to have someone that has that license, and they can be found on the website. So everybody else kind of in that same have the same position on that? Anyone else?
Yeah, this Carlos.
Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with you, Kathy. City of Lacey has the same policy, but we would just direct those with private ponds to the listing also with the certified applicators.
And this is Anne Marie with Thurston County. I'll just put in a plug. If you go to Thurston County, the Noxious Weed website, I believe they have fact sheets for a lot of different types of invasive species, and on those fact sheets shares information about different forms of different types of removal or eradication methods that you could use. So that's a very useful tool if you go to the Thurston County Noxious Weed website.
And everybody, just a little reminder, I know some of you have already completed the course today. Awesome job. There is a section, it's called Additional Resources, and all of the real big players in stormwater facilities as far as invasives and noxious weeds, all the sheets have been linked up there for you to download and print at your will. And then also the contact information, whether it's a phone number, an email, or a website for Thurston County Noxious Weeds, is all linked there for you as well. So if there's ever anything that you're concerned about how to address, because a lot of them are really tricky and can get way worse if you do address them wrong. And then again, some of you already know this, but you'll hear it's very, very time specific when you would treat. So you want to be very careful. If you have any concerns, if you're unsure, just give Thurston County Noxious Weeds a call and they'll give you some good guidance. Okay, I've got another question for you. What do I do if I see bullfrogs in my pond?
Go out and listen to them.
Yeah, this was actually a question I had recently, and Fish and Wildlife would actually like to know about that. There's a website, if you go to the Fish and Wildlife website, there's a link that'll take you to a place where you can submit a sighting of a bullfrog. So they're not supposed to be around here, and they can cause all kinds of problems. And I know they're nice to listen to, but yeah, they're kind of a nuisance because they can devastate other natural frog populations, and they pretty much eat anything that'll get in their mouth. So report it to Fish and Wildlife, and hopefully somebody from there will be able to help you out.
That's good information.
That is. Okay.
I had this question come up
Sure.
just recently as well, and I consulted with our biologist at the City of Olympia, and she said the only way to really eradicate them, and it's not permanent, it won't be permanent, is to drain the pond. So that would be quite an ordeal, I would think. And I didn't follow up with what that would entail or whether or not that would be something that the city would promote, because we found out that there was also otters in the pond, and she felt that the otters would probably so they would eat the frogs, and so they would probably be the best way to eradicate the frogs. This pond happened to be located adjacent to a wetland, so probably going to jump over into the pond from the wetlands continuously. So it may also be wise to look at your situation where your pond's located and where the frogs are coming from, because going through the trouble of draining your pond and then having them just return the next year might not make it worth it. But it is a good idea to report them. I agree with that.
That's super interesting, Susan. And that's so important. What Susan's saying is sort of like connecting the dots. You know, why is this happening? Where is it coming from? A lot of host vector relationships can get complicated, and often we try to band-aid them and then we make larger problems. And so I want to follow up on this bullfrogs question with a mosquito question, because I've heard this one several times and I think we should bring it up. I'm worried about mosquitoes breeding in my pond. What can I do about it?
This is Carlos with City of Lacey. Dave and I actually had a conversation about this very recently. I didn't know, Dave, did you want to chime in? Or we were talking about using those dunks?
Yeah, so in my former life, I worked for the Department of Health and Zoonotic Disease Surveillance, and part of that was monitoring mosquito populations. And so the advice we gave most people was to use it's called BTI. It's actually a bacteria. It's not a chemical at all. It's a bacteria that's very specific to a mosquito larva. It attacks the mosquito larva only, and it's harmless to everything else in the pond. And so you can pick those up at any of your home improvement stores. They call mosquito dunks or BTI. Look for that BTI though on the product, and that'll be your indicator that it's the bacteria that is in that product that you can actually insert into your pond. And by the time they get to be adults, that's a whole different problem. But rest assured, there's no West Nile virus or mosquito-borne diseases in Western Washington, so we're good to go there. They're mostly just nuisances, and the mosquito dunks will take care of the larvae.
That's good to know, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
Another alternative might be, if you're feeling energetic and you have wooded area close to your pond, is to build bat houses and station them in the trees, because bats will consume a large number of mosquitoes in a short period of time.
Yeah. That sounds like a very holistic solution. Love it. Okay, I've got another question for y'all. Changing gears a little bit, unless we have more mosquito knowledge. Nope. Okay. What is the recommended way to find estimates for the component costs for the non-routine maintenance HOA budget worksheet? For example, eventual wet pond replacement. This is a good question. We're still working up a perfect system here. But anybody, any inspectors or outreach specialists, anybody have anything, any thoughts here?
Yeah, just to get quotes, because it's even tough for us sometimes to get numbers from contractors. So the best option is just to, site specific, get a quote for your whatever's needed personally.
Good point, Skylar. So reach out to as many different contractors as possible, locations as possible for the supplies, and get quotes for them, and you'll be able to find a competitive quote the more you reach out. And that connects you back to our contractor list that we maintain collectively. Thurston County houses it on our website, and that is linked for you all on the online course as well. So that's just a starting point. It shows you the different types of contractors. Some have taken this workshop before for contractors, and some haven't. And so it's really up to you to do your research on these different contractors, but we give you a starting point. All right, I've got another question. Can we set up a volleyball net in the dry pond?
Say absolutely. Light recreation is encouraged in the dry ponds. Baseball, soccer, frisbee, badminton.
So the question that comes up sometimes with this one, because a lot of us are huge fans of the stacked use of areas, and Kathy is one of the biggest proponents, and as am I. One of my favorite parks is Yauger Park in Olympia, and there's just so much recreation happening there, and it's also very clean. I walk my dog there all the time, and that is the key, is when there is recreation happening in the dry pond, is that it's also kept very clean. So because water is infiltrating, and in Thurston County, a lot of that water is going into our underground drinking water source. And then there's also those dry ponds that are owned by the local jurisdiction, and oftentimes they'll be gated and they'll say keep out, and those are just kind of out of the question. You wouldn't want to play volleyball there anyways.
There was sort of a new thing to do in a pond that came up recently, and this was someone that wanted to run their RC cars in there, which I thought was a great idea. Nice big flat surface. They could, build little things for the RC cars to go around.
I just also wanted to add, because Kelsey was mentioning, the dogs and keeping it clean. So all of our jurisdictions do offer free pet waste stations for HOAs. So if you have a dry pond area that you're using for recreation and you'd like to site a pet waste station there, please contact your jurisdiction. We'd be happy to get you a free station for that area.
Lacey also offers that same program to pet-related businesses as well.
And Olympia.
So everyone, look on the additional resources section again, and you'll see pet waste programs. All 4 of us offer free pet waste stations for HOAs, and all of the information, the website, and the application forms are linked there for you as well. I think we need to address sediment because this is something that we have some really rich discussion about. So how do we know when the sediment buildup in our pond needs to be removed? And what is the best way to remove it and dispose of it? And so with that, you also have sediment that you're going to be removing or hiring a contractor to remove from your catch basin. So how do we know when it's time to remove sediment from our pond? And then best practices for where to take sediment as well. I know we all have something to add here. Well, so, I will say, I'll kick it off by saying that a lot of pollutants are bound to soil. And this is happening in a magnetic relationship. And it's not all pollutants, but some that are opposite charge of the soil. I'm not going to go any deeper than that. Are bound to soil. And in our wet ponds and in our catch basins, that soil is then settling out, or that sediment is settling out at the bottom of the pond and at the bottom of the catch basin, and eventually will need to be vectored out. Now, because it's bound to pollutants, often it needs to go to a special facility. Sometimes it doesn't. It really is kind of site specific. So on that note,
yeah, so I would just add, I did have a conversation with our stormwater utilities engineer, and who's also the author of our Lacey Stormwater Design Manual, about the tailings, the sediment buildup at the base of the pond and the proper disposal. And after talking to him, I think it would be appropriate to gather all the material and maybe lay it out to dry a little bit before you bag it in a trash bag and then dispose of it at the landfill. So I know there's been discussion about what to do with it, if you could take it to a facility. In some cases, you may need to take it to a facility because the quantities are so, the volume is so large. But in general, for private facilities, Lacey would be okay with that practice in small quantities.
Thurston County as well is okay with that practice of small quantities.
Right.
Yeah, Tumwater as well. And our manual states that when the pond is at 10%, when it reaches that 10% threshold of sediment, that's when it needs to be cleaned out. So that's when those elevations from your as-builds come in really handy. And it can be tricky to kind of determine where those elevations lie, but usually you can tell by what the top of the pond is and the bottom of the pond, without getting too technical with, surveyors' transits and all that, how much sediment you have. And you can also just look for functionality of the pond. When the functionality of the pond starts to be affected by the sediment in the bottom of the pond, probably should get it looked at to have it removed.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think also if you notice that your inlet pipes are filling up with sediment to a certain level, that you can make some assumptions about the level of your sediment rising in your pond. Is that correct, Kathy?
Yeah, you can go to your as-built and look at the elevation of your pipe and or your inlet pipe, and then if you can see what the elevation of the bottom of the pond is, you'd be pretty able to easily determine that there's too much sediment if it's coming up close to that pipe. Another thing you might notice is if your wet pond is overflowing into the dry pond more often than it ever used to, that the capacity's been reduced, and so the water's having to go into emergency overflow into the dry pond.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll also remember, as part of my inspection, the way the water flows, and it hits the catch basin before it hits the pond. So if you keep those catch basins maintained, there's less likelihood that that sediment is going to reach your pond. The sediment in the pond is going to be a lot more costly than maintaining your catch basins. So keep those catch basins clean, and you're going to save a lot of money in your pond maintenance.
I would also add that's a good argument for making sure that the sides of your pond aren't eroding, because that's where you're also going to gain sediment into your pond.
And in addition to that, there's also the cattail material, the leaves from trees, any of that vegetative stuff from the sides and in the pond itself will die back and accumulate in that sediment.
Okay. Thank you, Evergreen Point HOA Board of Directors, for being here, and have a wonderful evening. I do want to make sure that they receive a copy of their as-built to their association Services of Puyallup. So Evergreen Point HOA?
Yes, I responded to them. Yeah, and I will send it to them tomorrow. Thanks, Kelsey.
Okay, they have to run. So those are awesome answers. I think that was a really, really good discussion. I'm glad we had that. To be continued. And I want to jump into this because there's two questions on this. How about having an eco-friendly garden in the dry pond? Is that an option?
I would think that, this is Carlos again at the City of Lacey. I would think that perhaps a rain garden would be a better use for an idea like that, because the dry ponds are probably going to be too deep. But I don't know. I would have to look at we'd have to look at the design. We'd have to look at the facility to see. But in general, I think that's something better suited for a rain garden, and we have lots of guidance. I think didn't we, Kelsey, link the Western Washington Rain Garden Handbook?
That's also in the additional resources. And another piece here to consider is the relationship that the soil has with soil and the microbes and the plants have with pollutants are really important to keep in mind here. So they're providing treatment to the stormwater as it filters through into the groundwater in your dry pond. So if you were to have an eco-friendly garden, again, I think what Carlos says is right on, kind of leaning towards a rain garden, because you wouldn't want to eat. You would likely not want to eat the vegetables from it. So now maybe you're thinking flowers. So there's just a lot of context. So design would have to come into the equation before we could answer this question, and what types of plants you'd be growing there. But I doubt that any of us would recommend eating plants from a stormwater pond, because again, the plants are going to hold on to some of the pollutants as well.
Right.
And this is Anne Marie again with Thurston County. Also want to mention that you don't want to be adding in wood chips or compost in your dry pond either. That would end up, wood chips and stuff can clog pipes, but also it would be adding a lot of nutrients that we actually don't want to be getting carried in the water that's getting infiltrated.
Totally.
I would say that Olympia's perspective on this probably typically would be that these facilities are designed, inspected, and engineered a specific way, and we probably, in most cases, wouldn't want that altered.
Yes, you're going to see that time and time again. You're going to hear me say it several times as you go through the online content and the several different videos I mentioned. If you add beauty bark, if you change the specs, if you change your swale and add rocks, for example, if you veer away from the original design that's in the as-built, technically all of the jurisdictions would require you to turn that back to the original design. So before you make any kind of drastic decisions design-wise, contact your local jurisdiction's inspector and have a conversation about it, just to save yourself time and money and maybe put together a better plan. So we are going on 7:15. I think we have time for a few more questions. Where can we get a weed wrench? All 4 of our jurisdictions offer weed wrenches. So we will all be happy to rent a weed wrench to you or your HOA. We do say if you own more than 5 acres and you're getting a lot of Scotch broom pretty regularly, or if you have more than 5 acres, you may want to invest in your own weed wrench. However, all 4 of our jurisdictions do rent them out for free, so just connect with us. And feel free to add anything to that. Okay. Our pond has a lot of yellow flag iris. Can we chemically treat it?
You can have an licensed aquatic applicator treat that, but it has to be a licensed aquatic applicator.
Okay, maybe one more question and we might call it. Does the pond have to be fenced? I'll start by saying no. Again, this is going to come down to the spec of the pond and the type of pond, who owns the pond. A lot of times with wet ponds, they're fenced for safety reasons because the HOA or the neighborhood feels more comfortable having their kiddos running around and knowing that there's a fence. Sometimes the dry pond is fenced because it's owned by a local jurisdiction, and we want to make it clear that it's not a public space. What else, guys?
If the slope is greater than 3 to 1, then it has to have a fence.
Yeah.
Good point. All right. Any other thoughts on that?
There's a follow-up question to that, which is, do you need to have a sign if you have a fence?
I don't think there's a requirement for a sign, but it's a good idea to have a sign so people know what it is, and maybe an informational sign so they can understand a little bit more about the stormwater system itself.
I think that's a really good point. Something that all of our jurisdictions sometimes see is community members not knowing what a pond is. Say it's a dry pond and they don't know. They think, oh, it's just a natural area, and maybe they dump some of their yard waste, and it turns out it's a dry pond. So that could be avoided, or some of those situations could be avoided with a sign that shows the ecological function, shows what the pond is, why it's there, what the services it's providing are. And there's a lot of us on the panel right now. I'll call Susan out and Anne Marie out. They're pretty deep in signage right now, stormwater facility signage. So write their names down and reach out to them. I'd be happy to chat with you as well. All of us have some knowledge about signage, but there's some really creative things that you can do with a sign.
City of Lacey offers a free education sign program to HOAs and stormwater facilities within city limits. You apply and we will give you 1 to 2 signs to post at your stormwater facility to educate residents and passerbys about its function and why it's there.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Stormwater does the same thing. So we've got
Stormwater does the same thing, okay.
And that goes for Olympia as well.
Now, do we do that at Thurston County?
I believe so, Kathy. I believe we do. Yes, and we have different signs, a few different sign options for different types of stormwater facilities they might have, whether it's a wet pond, or I think
it's just a general informational sign.
So yeah, we do. So it sounds like all 4 jurisdictions.
I do believe for the newer developments, it's a requirement in the city of Olympia, but some of the older developments don't have them, and we're happy to provide that for you if you're in an older development that doesn't have it.
And,
right on.
In Thurston County, they're actually, with the newer developments, they're now signing the swales, the infiltration swales, so that people know what they are, so they don't fill them with rocks.
Nice.
That's really great to know. We have so many resources. The best thing you can do is build a relationship with your local jurisdiction and get in on all these different resources, because there's a lot of them, and we're not even covering, I'm sure, a quarter of them on this webinar. And then speak up in the discussion in the online classroom as well, and we can dig into some more resources available for you and answer some more questions there as well. So I do want to address this last question here real quick. I'm not sure where we're going to go with it, but back to saplings in the dry pond. In the summer and then in the winter, the dry pond gets a thick crust on it. The trees help to break up this crust, so it seems to me that this helps the water infiltrate. If the water goes into the earth faster, what is the problem with that? We have a pond at a farm from a nearby housing development.
Well, I can answer that a little bit by saying that the ponds are designed to hold the water and have it resident time before it infiltrates, so it infiltrates slowly to mimic nature the way it would if the development wasn't there. So if you're allowing the water to infiltrate faster, then you're not getting the treatment and sediment filtering out before it infiltrates. So you need that resident time in the pond that it was designed to have. Was that clear?
Otherwise you would overwhelm the facility and potentially have sediment washing downstream further than what was intended. Is that what you're getting at, Kathy? Or
yeah, that, but also just the infiltration rate, that it's designed to have a certain infiltration rate.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And that would change that. But yeah, I mean, if the more material that you get in there, then there again you have less space in the pond. And when the trees get bigger, if they do blow over or something, then you break the soil again with the roots of the tree falling over. So there's a lot of reasons why they don't want trees in the bottom of a pond or on berms.
Okay. So that is all for the Q&A tonight. Unless someone else has something to add that we didn't touch on that you'd like everybody to hear.
Dumpster program.
Ah, yeah. Tell them about the dumpster program.
The Thurston County offers a free dumpster for your pond for one time in the pond's life. You can get a 20 or 30 cubic yard dumpster to put all your vegetative waste, cattails, whatever, and we'll haul it to the dump one time. And I keep a log, a spreadsheet, so I know which ponds have had the dumpster. So if you need a dumpster, you should call and find out if that's available for your neighborhood. And I think some of the other jurisdictions do that as well.
Yes, the City of Tumwater offers the same program, and I don't think we've actually had anybody take us up on that offer yet. So anybody in Tumwater who's got a pond and would like to do that, just contact us and we can get that set up.
City of Lacey has offered this program in the past. It's currently unavailable, but should be back soon.
This program is not currently available in Olympia, but we're working on it.
Okay. So stay tuned for the City of Olympia and the City of Lacey, and call about the program for the City of Tumwater and Thurston County, because it is currently available there. All right. Does anybody else have any other programs or cool tips you'd like to throw out there?
Did we mention, Kelsey, about the spills hotline? Just if they see a spill near a facility, to call the hotline, and we will investigate and remedy it if necessary.
Good point. We all have a spills hotline. That is a section of its own. There's a video on this and follow-up resources with all 4 jurisdictions spill hotline, and kind of like a how to call in a spill as well, what to include, if you can include photos. And oftentimes I know I've talked to folks, they see a spill, but they're not sure it's a spill, or they're not sure what it is. Still call it in, and then tell us where it is, if you can include photos, so that we can respond to it, because the odds are it does need to get cleaned up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so that's it for Q&A tonight. I wanted to make sure that I put out the contact information for all 4 jurisdictions inspectors. So these are the emails. Email these folks if you need an as-built, if you have any further questions, just to build a relationship with them, really. And then my information is at the top. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know how you're liking the course. And thank you for attending tonight. We hope you enjoyed this live stormwater inspections webinar. Remember to reach out to your jurisdiction's inspector with any questions or to schedule a site visit. And here's a little reminder, all 4 of our jurisdictions, all the inspection forms are due August 31st. So we look forward to receiving all of those.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.